Let's go to the Phillies, who, according to sources, have hired their manager. It will be Joe Girardi. He will be the new Phillies manager. Scott Lauber from the Inquirer here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline to give us a little insight on the hire and what we can expect. And what does this mean? Scott, welcome back, pal. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
All right, man. Well, Girardi, I think it's a popular hire. But what's the message here with this hire in terms of, we heard Middleton talk about, we need analytics. We don't have enough analytics. We're behind in that department. Last I checked, Girardi was not a guy who was too open to analytics. So what's the message here in your opinion?
He actually is. So I think it's a few things. Look, Girardi managed the Yankees for 10 years, and during those 10 years, the Yankees were really at the forefront of analytics, building a huge analytics department. It carried down to the field, and Girardi did a lot of what they wanted him to do as far as implementing a lot of the strategies and the designs that they wanted to achieve with their analytics department. He's an engineering major. He was an engineering major at Northwestern. He says he loves math. He loves statistics. He understands it. I think he's probably a little bit more literate in analytics than the other two candidates that they interviewed, Showalter and Dusty Baker. But I think where Girardi sort of diverges from, let's say, Gabe Kapler, who was all in on analytics, is that, Girardi spent 15 years as a player and has not forgotten the fact that the game is played by humans, and the game is a game of emotion, and numbers don't always tell the whole story. And so I think that Girardi was more inclined to push back a little against the analytics people with the Yankees. I think that was healthy. I think it'll be a healthy thing here. I think very much Gabe Kapler was full steam ahead with analytics, and for a guy who played 12 years in the majors himself, he seemed to sort of forget that there's a human element to this game as well. So, I think it's good that they'll have a guy who understands how to sort of blend analytics and kind of going by feel and gut and what that tells you. And I think that'll be a healthy check. I think Girardi will represent a healthy check on an organization that's gone whole hog into analytics and maybe gotten away a little bit from some of the things that they still need to pay attention to.
Now, Scott, there are reports that the front office preferred Showalter, but Middleton preferred Girardi. So I guess the questions go back to that press conference and wonder how much pull and say does Matt Klentak have if he's preferring Buck Showalter and McPhail and Middleton saying, sorry, you're not getting your guy.
Yeah, look, we're never truly going to know, I don't think. Look, for what it's worth today, we've been told, a colleague of mine, Matt Breen, tweeted a while ago that Klentak was on board and that Girardi was his choice. Of course, that's what they're going to say on the day that they're going to announce the hiring of Joe Girardi, and I'm sure that Klentak and Girardi will present quite the unified front when they sit there at the press conference together, whatever day that winds up being. Whether or not Klentak wanted Showalter or Girardi, we'll probably never know. We'll have to take them at their word. Look, there's no doubt that 2 weeks ago today was that press conference or 2 weeks ago tomorrow, I guess, was that press conference at Citizens Bank Park. And, if we had any question before, we were left with none any longer, that it's John Middleton who's running the Phillies. And big decisions like this are going to be decisions that he'll have input in. And he should. He's the owner of the team. And if you're talking about signing, I think we talked about this, that, there was some conversation about, he did the Harper deal. I don't think that's quite right. I think that, when you're doing a deal of that magnitude, the owner is always going to be involved. Scott Boras makes a practice of dealing directly with owners rather than with general managers. He does it with every team he deals with. And so, of course, Middleton was going to be involved. But when it got down to the actual nitty-gritty in that final day or two of negotiations, Klentak was the guy on the phone with Boras. And so, Matt Klentak is still the general manager, but Middleton clearly has shown he wants to be involved when it comes to really big decisions. He was involved in this one. I know he met with Girardi on Monday as part of Girardi's all-day second interview down here, and I'm sure that if Joe Girardi is the choice, one thing we know for certain is Middleton preferred Girardi, and we'll have to take them at their word that Klentak did too.
All right, Scott. Let me ask you this, because and this is going to be a little bit of a long-winded question, but I think you'll follow me. The teams that go full court press on analytics, that even John Middleton talked about being behind in his press conference, they feel like they've got the game mapped out from a numerical standpoint, from a matchup standpoint, and what they need from their manager is a guy that can really kind of be a leader in the clubhouse, I mean, the Yankees like Aaron Boone, he goes up to the plate, he yells about how his team are a bunch of effing savages. The players love playing for him. And the one thing about Girardi, who I absolutely love as a hire and a manager, but the one thing about him, and you read from his Yankees tenure, is that, the players maybe have thought he was a little bit, I guess, strict, or didn't, rally them the way you'll see an Aaron Boone or some of these guys who, A.J. Hinch, that some people have to Google to figure out who they are. Do you see that kind of at all being a potential obstacle, hurdle, issue, anything of that nature with where the Phillies want to be and what they've got now in Joe? For a lot.
I think it's a really fair question, Jeff. And I just wrote a story that's going to go up on Inquirer.com this afternoon, kind of about. I was sort of thinking back to 2 years ago, and 2 years ago, I think it was November 2nd, 2017, when the Phillies introduced Gabe Kapler, Klentak talked all about how well he connects with people and how well he relates to today's players. And I think that's a thing. I think that, like, all these guys who play today, they're all millennials, and they all kind of respond probably a little bit differently than, guys who played, 5, 10, even 15 years ago, and at very much the same time in New York, the Yankees were letting Joe Girardi go, and they were hiring Aaron Boone, and Brian Cashman was saying a lot of the same things about how well Boone connects with players and all of that. So I think it's a very fair question to say, look, you want to be a progressive organization, you want to be a forward-thinking organization, you want to be on the cusp of all that's new and good, and you're hiring a manager who probably was a little too intense at times for the team that let him go most recently. Now, the Yankees will tell you, and I think Brian Cashman addressed this today in a press conference about Yankee matters. He was asked about Girardi. The Yankees will tell you that, the time had come, that Girardi had been their manager for 10 years, and that if you work for anyone for 10 years, eventually it's, their voice is not going to be as strong as it once was, or maybe their intensity is going to be a little bit too much. And so the Yankees are going to say that, look, after 10 years, we felt like we needed a change. I went through that with the Red Sox when they changed managers, when they got rid of Terry Francona. They said, look, we needed a change. So I do believe that there is some truth to that that there's a shelf life to these jobs, and after a certain time, you need to make a change. And I'm sure that that's what the Phillies are going to tell you, is that it's not a matter of Girardi not being able to connect with today's players. It's just that that set of players with the Yankees, for whatever reason. Now, I do think it's going to help Girardi that he has Rob Thompson here as his bench coach. Not only did he work with Thompson in New York for many years, but Thompson already knows the players here. And so if there's going to be a conduit to the clubhouse between Girardi and the players, it's going to be Rob Thompson. So, look, there's no denying that Girardi's going to manage a little differently. He's got a very different personality than Gabe Kapler did. But, maybe as it just got through writing, I think that's probably a good thing. You're talking about a team that hasn't been in the playoffs in 8 years, and maybe if they need kind of a little swift kick in the butt, maybe a guy like Girardi can do that.
What's the first thing that Joe Girardi is going to change, Scott? If you have to predict, what's the most noticeable adjustment that we're going to see with Girardi as manager?
Well, Gabe Kapler believed really firmly in players policing themselves, and I think Girardi believes in that too, but only to a certain point. I think you're going to see probably some more rules. I think you're probably going to see a little bit more structure. He's going to be a little bit more of a boss. in that clubhouse than I think Kapler was. I think Kapler was inclined to let the players do their thing. And, it's interesting, when in the summer when Segura didn't hustle and all of that, I think Girardi was doing a game, Phillies game at that point, and he said, something to the effect of, ideally you'd like the players to police a situation like that. But McCutchen had just gotten hurt, and McCutchen was sort of the leader of the team, and there was kind of a leadership void in the clubhouse. And I think Girardi said something to the effect of, well, if you don't have the players to sort of police that, you've got to do it yourself. And so I wonder whether he's going to look at the roster that he has. He's going to see talented players. He's going to see some veteran players, but he's not going to see a ton of leaders. And if he's going to try to kind of be sort of that leadership, fill some of that leadership void himself. And I think maybe that's one of the first changes we'll see. It's just a little bit more structure and a little bit more, just sort of more of a firm hand, I guess, from the manager's office.
Scott Lauber from the Inquirer, as the Phillies have hired Joe Girardi. He will be the next Phillies manager, and we will obviously see now what they give him because he needs some help. And obviously he got a kind of a young Yankees team and really took them, the team that you now see. He got them a couple of years ago, and he was the NL Manager of the Year with a pretty interesting Marlins team.